gunned down on the exact same block he publicly banned his famous childhood friend from just 2 weeks earlier. A multi-millionaire rapper tries to cut ties with the streets for good, only to get dragged back into the headlines by a ghost from his past. This is a story of envy, street politics, and a code of loyalty that turned on itself. This is how NLMB JDog got after banning Herbo from the block. The entire saga kicked off when Herbo, born Herbert Wright III, sat down for a landmark interview on the It's Up There podcast. By this point in his life, Herbo was no longer just a rapper. He was an institution. He had clawed his way out of the violent crucible of Chicago's South Side, built a multi-million-dollar career, had a beautiful family, and was on the cusp of turning 30. He was a survivor of a war zone that had claimed countless friends and peers. With a future that was finally secure, he made a conscious public decision to sever the ties that could drag him back into the abyss. He was done with the street life, and he wanted the world to know it was a business decision, not a personal one. He looked into the camera and laid it all on the line, stating unequivocally, "Man, I'm cutting all ties from that. I don't care what a nay think about me. Call me a 100 million times. I don't care asterisk."
Like, man, I'm cutting all ties from that shit. I don't care what a nigga about me. Call me a 100 million times.
Yes.
I don't care. Like, I'm not even gonna feed into it. And you think I ain't had to have them uncomfortable conversations? You nigga ain't told me I done left the hood and forgot about the hood I'm a and I don't take care of niggas. I ain't the one bonding out no more and paying for funerals. It's like, how many times I'm supposed to do for that? Do that shit. What y'all want to catch a Rico every time you go to jail for a gun charge, a violent charge?
You coming.
I'm the one coming.
This wasn't just empty talk or a celebrity trying to clean up their image. It was a raw, calculated declaration of self-preservation. Herbo spent a significant portion of the interview breaking down the impossible paradox faced by those who make it out of the hood. The streets operate on an unspoken, ironclad contract. If you get rich, you become the emergency fund for everyone still trapped in the cycle. You are the first call for bond money when someone gets caught with a strap, the first person hit up for lawyer fees when a case gets serious, and the one expected to cover funeral costs when the inevitable happens. Herbo, however, saw the long game. He understood that continuing to be the financial backbone for active street members was a direct flight to a federal RICO indictment. The feds don't just see a friend helping a friend. They see a pattern, a conspiracy, a criminal enterprise funded by legitimate money. He spelled it out with frustrated clarity, asking the rhetorical question that every successful street-bred artist has asked themselves.
Do that shit. What y'all want to catch a Rico every time you go to jail for a gun charge, a violent charge?
You coming.
I'm the one coming. Like,
The specific mention of a Rico was the tell. He knew that every dollar he sent back to the block was another thread connecting his empire to their crimes, making him an increasingly attractive target for prosecutors looking to make a name for themselves. To truly grasp the seismic impact of his words, you have to understand the ground they were spoken on. Herbo is a product of NLMB, a name that echoes through the South Side of Chicago with a reputation forged in violence and loyalty. NLMB, or No Limit Muskegon Boys, is a notorious set from the Terrortown area, specifically centered around 78th and Essex. They were a powerful and volatile merger of renegade factions from two of Chicago's most legendary gangs, the Almighty Black P. Stone Nation and the Gangster Disciples. This unique origin made them a hybrid force, unbound by the traditional politics of their parent organizations and known for their extreme aggression. NLMB built a fearsome reputation, becoming infamous for their role in the drill music scene's most violent era. But they also became a star factory, producing rappers like Herbo and his lifelong friend Lil Bibby, who together put Terrortown on the global map. For a figurehead like Herbo, someone whose entire brand was built on the authenticity of his NLMB roots, to publicly denounce the very system that birthed him was a profound shockwave. He was choosing his family's future over a street code that, at his level of success, offered nothing but escalating risk. In his mind, it wasn't disloyalty, it was evolution. But back on 78th Street, among the guys who never left, it sounded a lot like betrayal, the old guard's retaliation. And the loudest voice of dissent came from a ghost of his past, a man who embodied the very code Herbo was now rejecting, NLMB JDog. JDog, whose real name was Jalen Hibbler, was a man out of time. He had just recently been released from prison after serving nearly a decade behind bars, a sentence that had consumed his entire young adulthood. He walked out of the penitentiary into a world that had drastically changed. His childhood friend, the kid he grew up with, was now a global superstar. But instead of seeing that friend repping the set that made him, JDog saw him on a podcast disowning it. The sting of that perceived betrayal was immediate and deep. JDog took to Instagram Live, his face a mask of indignation, and launched a furious direct assault on Herbo's street credibility. He attempted to rewrite history, painting Herbo as a protected figure who was never truly in the field, a rapper who was shielded from the real dirt. He claimed, Herbo talks on the internet like he'd been with the Saint when the guys told him don't do Saint since 2014. JDog's rage was more than just envy. It was a defense of his own life's choices, rooted in a worldview that had been frozen in 2016, the year he was locked up. He went to prison during the peak of the drill era's violence, a time when unwavering street loyalty was the only currency that held any value. He came home to a new reality, one where his famous friend now viewed that same loyalty not as a virtue, but as a dangerous liability. JDog felt that he had paid the ultimate price for the set. He had sacrificed his freedom, his youth, his entire future, for the No Limit name. Now the guy who had blown up was turning his back on the very soldiers still fighting the war, including the ones, like himself, who were locked down. His tirade continued as he called Herbo out for not sending money to members in prison, an intensely personal complaint. For 9 years, he had sat in a cell, and in his mind, the man who was making millions off the stories of their shared struggle had forgotten him. To JDog, Herbo's pragmatic decision to protect his future was a profound slap in the face to the sacrifices he and others had made. It invalidated his entire existence. Fueled by this potent cocktail of resentment and a rigid, old-school street honor, JDog made his fateful declaration. In front of a live digital audience, he publicly and officially banned Herbo from their own block. He drew a line in the concrete of 78th and Essex and dared Herbo to cross it, warning that if he showed his face in the heart of NLMB territory, there would be serious problems. It was a direct and audacious challenge to Herbo's authority, his history, and his fundamental right to come home. JDog was attempting to seize control of the narrative and the block, to re-establish the old code, the one he had lived and done a decade in prison for. He was defending his own life against Herbo's new, evolved reality. In doing so, he lit a fuse on a powder keg, setting in motion a tragic collision course that could only end in the making of JDog. To understand the unbending, rigid conviction that drove JDog to his fatal confrontation, you have to rewind to 2016. That was the year his identity was forged in the crucible of Chicago's brutal street violence, a cycle of revenge that would define the rest of his short, tragic life. In August of 2016, the city of Chicago was drowning in. It was one of the deadliest months the city had seen in nearly 2 decades, a relentless wave of that left communities reeling. During that violent summer, JDog's own world was shattered. His father, 42-year-old Christopher Hibbler, known on the streets as Maniac Chris, was shot multiple times in the chest and pronounced the scene. In the unforgiving world of NLMB, an act of such profound disrespect demands an equally profound response. Inaction is not an option. It is seen as a sign of weakness that invites more aggression. For the son of a fallen street figure, the pressure to get back is not just a desire, it is a sacred obligation. Just 1 month later, on September 16, 2016, a 17-year-old JDog Hibbler decided it was time to uphold that obligation. He slid on his ops. In a cold, calculated act of vengeance, a drive-by shooting unfolded just a single block away from where his father had been, in the heart of rival black mob territory. JDog was inside a black Dodge Avenger that pulled up on 2 teenagers, 18-year-old Alexander Town and his 16-year-old friend. The car drove past them, then abruptly stopped and reversed, blocking their path. That's when JDog extended his arm from the vehicle and opened fire. Alexander Town was hit in the hand and stomach, collapsing near a gate, while his younger companion managed to escape unharmed. The entire incident was captured with chilling clarity on a Chicago police surveillance camera. According to the brutal logic of the street code, JDog had done what he was supposed to do. He had honored his father's memory and stood on business for his set, but the laws of the state were far less forgiving than the laws of the street, and the consequences were swift and severe. The 16-year-old who survived the attack knew JDog and quickly identified him to the police. In a twist of fate, both JDog and the key witness soon found themselves incarcerated in the Cook County Juvenile Detention Center on separate, unrelated charges. Inside, JDog made it terrifyingly clear that the street's code of silence was still in full effect. On 2 separate occasions, he spotted the witness. The first time, he sent a chilling, non-verbal threat. He covered his mouth with one hand while pressing 2 fingers to his temple, mimicking a gun. The second time, he simply stared, a silent promise of violence. This brazen act of witness intimidation, committed while already in custody, demonstrated his deep and unwavering commitment to the street life. Even when caught, he was still enforcing its brutal rules. He was subsequently charged as an adult for the Alexander town and sentenced to what is believed to be around 10 years in prison, of which he would ultimately serve 9. His time behind bars only seemed to harden his mentality. In 2017, while awaiting his sentence in Cook County Jail, he was one of 8 inmates charged with aggravated arson for using a microwave to set their uniforms on fire, an act of rebellion that injured 2 correctional officers. JDog had sacrificed his entire young adulthood from the age of 17 to 26 for a principle. That sacrifice became his identity. So when he finally came home and heard Herbo, the man who had become a millionaire, calling that very same principle a trap, it was more than just an insult. It was a fundamental rejection of his entire existence. A civil war, a hood divided. JDog's public challenge to Herbo was a spark that ignited a civil war, exposing a deep and painful fracture within the ranks of NLMB itself. Herbo, now a seasoned veteran of public scrutiny, refused to stay silent. He immediately clapped back on social media, dismissing JDog's threats as the desperate ramblings of someone who was never a true factor in the streets. He posted a defiant message asserting his own history and resilience. "All I know is in my entire life of being outside, ain't nobody never did to me ever." But he didn't stop there. To add a layer of personal humiliation to his rebuttal, he dug into the archives and posted a throwback picture of himself in his younger days, easily slam dunking a much smaller JDog on a basketball court. The caption was a direct and condescending dismissal. "All that playing like you crazy little boy. You ain't crazy, never been crazy." Herbo then moved to dismantle the very foundation of JDog's argument, exposing the blatant hypocrisy of the supposed ban. He pointed out that on August 21st, just a few short weeks before the beef erupted, he was standing on that exact same block, 78th and Essex, shooting the music video for his song Reason. And who was right there in the background, walking up to him and shaking his hand as if they were brothers? NLMB JDog. Herbo drove the point home, writing, "Telling me I can't come on my block I was just on after you walked up and shook my hand is insane." This revelation reframed the entire conflict. The ban wasn't based on some long-standing principle or a deep-seated issue of loyalty. It was a sudden and opportunistic wave of resentment, triggered entirely by the podcast interview. JDog's principled stand was starting to look more and more like a personal attack fueled by jealousy and a sense of being left behind. The internal conflict reached its definitive climax when another NLMB heavyweight, a respected figure known as Big O, stepped into the fray. In the hierarchy of Terror Town, Big O's name carries immense weight, and he made it unequivocally clear where his allegiance lay. He took to Instagram and issued a public decree, a final word on the matter that served as a direct threat to JDog and anyone who sided with him. In defense of Herbo, he wrote, "Blood can go wherever the FK he wanna go. Let a nay play and go against this. Y'all will be talking to God about it." Big O siding with Herbo wasn't just a matter of friendship, it was a strategic business decision. Herbo was a valuable asset to the set, a source of clout and potential opportunity. JDog, with his public infighting and rigid ideology, was quickly becoming a dangerous liability. Feeling his support within his own hood completely evaporate, JDog made one last desperate appeal to the court of public opinion. He went on Instagram Live again, this time walking through the blighted, rundown streets of 78th and Essex. He panned his camera across the abandoned houses, the boarded-up storefronts, and the general decay of the neighborhood his father had for. He tried to rebrand himself as the true voice of the forgotten trenches, attempting to place the blame for the neighborhood's dilapidated condition squarely on Herbo's shoulders. In a voice filled with a mix of anger and desperation, he pleaded, "Gee, Herbo, come take care of this Saint. Open up some, bro. Give us something." But it was a futile gesture. He had already lost the internal power struggle and had alienated the key figures who could have supported him. His final plea came across not as a righteous call to action, but as a sign of profound weakness. And in the unforgiving ecosystem of the streets, weakness is a scent that attracts predators. The final warning. Responding directly to JDog's persistent threats and public challenges, Herbo laid down a grim ultimatum, a line that would hang over the entire situation like a dark prophecy. He told him, "If you want to do something to me, don't warn me. Just do it, bleed." It was a stark and fatalistic acceptance of the rules of the game, and a grim foreshadowing of what was to come. For weeks, JDog had been making noise, relentlessly drawing attention to himself, and in the process, creating enemies both inside and outside of his own set. He had effectively painted a massive glowing target on his own back. Before the beef with Herbo, he was just another man fresh out of the penitentiary, a ghost trying to find his place in a world that had moved on, largely off the radar of his old adversaries. But by publicly challenging a star of Herbo's magnitude, he had sent up a flare, announcing to the entire city of Chicago, to the grieving family of Alexander Town, to rival gangs who held old grudges, to everyone, that NLMB JDog was back on 78th and Essex, and he was making himself a problem. Just 2 weeks after the online back and forth had seemingly died down, the inevitable happened. On the night of 29 September, alerts from the citizen crime app Spot News began to light up social media feeds across Chicago. 2 people had been shot on 78th and Essex. The location was no coincidence. It was the exact block JDog had so vehemently tried to claim as his own, the same corner he had declared off-limits to Herbo. The details that emerged were brutal and spoke to the calculated nature of the attack. A 19-year-old who was with him had been shot in the chest, and 27-year-old Jalen JDog Hibbler had been struck 6 times, all in the back. The nature of the wounds was a clear indicator of an ambush. He had been caught completely lacking, with no chance to defend himself. When police arrived, they found a scene of absolute chaos. They recovered 19 shell casings scattered across the pavement, along with a rifle and live rounds, suggesting a heavy and overwhelming assault. They also found 2 handguns on the victims, indicating that JDog and his young companion were still caught so off guard that they never had a chance to use them. Both men were rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center in critical condition. But a short time later, the news that everyone was expecting was confirmed. NLMB JDog was on the very piece of concrete he had spilled so much digital ink and emotional energy over. In the end, he had talked himself into a casket. The aftermath was an immediate and intense storm of speculation. The question on everyone's mind was, who pulled the trigger? Was it get back from the family and friends of Alexander Town, who had waited 9 long years for their own form of street justice? Was it an op from a rival set who saw a perfect opportunity to eliminate a loud, controversial target who was visibly at odds with his own people? Or, in the most tragic possibility of all, was he backdoored by someone from his own set? Someone who had decided that JDog and the internal drama he created were more trouble than he was worth? The case remains unsolved, another name added to Chicago's long list of street tragedies. In the end, JDog became a martyr for the very street code that Herbo had publicly warned was a death sentence. His murder wasn't just another statistic, it was a grim and undeniable validation of Herbo's final prophetic warning. If you liked this video, click one of the windows on either side to watch a video similar to this one.